So in this video, we're going to be talking about all of the different sensory receptors. So I wanted to remind you what a sensory receptor is and where we find it. So in chapter 11, we talked about reflex arcs. And remember that a sensory receptor is the very beginning of a reflex arc. So in this example of a reflex arc, the sensory receptors would be in the skin for touch. And then that information would go to a sensory neuron, which would then go to the interneuron, a motor neuron, and then some sort of effector. That is what a sensory receptor is. There's a whole bunch of different types of them. So we're going to go through a list of them. You guys have a little flow chart to fill out in your notes. Mine will look a little bit different because I had to fit it all into one screen, so it'll look like slightly different than yours. So we're going to start with photoreceptors. Photoreceptors are ones that take on photons of light. So it's used for vision. And the examples of photoreceptors that we have in our body are called rods and cones, and they're found in our eye, specifically on the retina in our eye. We also have something called chemoreceptors. So they're going to take in chemical energy. So we have a bunch of different examples like taste, which our taste buds are on our tongue. We'll take in chemicals from our food and we can interpret them as different tastes. We also have smell. Smell is these little receptors in our nose called olfactory receptors, which is a fancy name for smell. And then we also have some internal sensors that use certain chemical changes in our body. For example, the changes in osmoreceptors in our hypothalamus, which basically measures how much water we have in our blood, which is related to our blood pressure. And also the receptors we have for pH in our arteries, like our carotid and our aorta, which measure the pH changes in our blood. So if our pH gets too high or too low, we will start breathing faster or slower. We also have things called mechanoreceptors. Mechanoreceptors are things that respond to mechanical energy, so basically movement. So this includes our touch, our pressure, our pain receptors in our skin. They respond to movement because if you press down almost like a button, the skin will be pressed down, which is a movement. Our hearing, which seems weird because you wouldn't think movement and hearing, but they are hair cells in our inner ear that are submerged in fluid. When we take in a sound wave, it ripples through this fluid and moves these hair cells in our inner ear, and that's how we hear. We also have different types of hair cells in our ear that respond to balance. So again, submerged in fluid, and when we spin or move our head, our balance kind of senses these things in our semicircular canals and our vestibule, which we're going to talk about later when we talk about the ear. And then the last thing that is a mechanoreceptor are these things called proprioceptors, which are found inside the joints and our muscles and our tendons. And they're the things that kind of sense our environment. So if our arms are out, that wouldn't be related to our balance because it's not related to our core, but we still have to be able to move our arms and our legs, kind of coordinate motions with them. So the proprioceptors are in charge of that. And they are basically in charge of sensing our environment and where our limbs are at any given time. We can train these to get better, and that's kind of how you get better at throwing a ball, for example. When you first do it, it's really, really hard, but as you practice a skill over time, your proprioceptors are going to be sensing your environment and kind of remembering, and it's kind of like your muscle memory. You've heard that saying before. And the last type of sensory receptor is a thermoreceptor, which is for temperature and is also in our skin. So those are the different types of sensory receptors, the things that we can take information in at the very beginning of our reflex arc. We're going to specifically talk a lot about hearing and balance and also vision, but these are all other options of things that we could do for a reflex arc. So that's all I have to talk about today in this video. Hopefully it makes sense. Talk to you guys later. Bye!